So this is the Guidewire website which we have actually. And these are the customers that are consuming this Guidewire across the globe actually. Okay. So these are like CompWest, Concord Group Insurance, Concat, General Agency. So these are the customers basically for the Guidewire. So Guidewire, as I think you rightly mentioned, it's a vast and it's a hot selling tool actually. Guidewire, right? I mean, it's basically it's a hot selling tool for the insurance domain actually, and how it helps its customers, right? It's very user friendly basically when it comes to its rating, underwriting approvals, user availability, right? All these things, the adaptability. Like if you want to change something, you can easily go and switch. So I mean, you can just change it using advanced product designer. So we have different. I mean, I will come to all those things, but I'm just briefing about Guidewire's importance actually. So that is where Guidewire's prominence comes into picture, and it's easily flexible, and it's very adaptable basically to any change that is needed. Okay, so these are few of the customers that Guidewire is they're having. Okay, so I will just begin with the syllabus, right? The first one is going to be the insurance 10.0 fundamental thing, right? What is a Guidewire product architecture? So before starting with the Guidewire, definitely you need to know the architecture of the Guidewire product, right? So I mean, I'm not sure if you have the access to this Guidewire education portal. If you have it, you can just search for this Insurance U 10.0 fundamentals. Okay, so this is the latest
I
one.
lost the access. I had
Oh,
it.
okay. Okay, that's fine. I mean, you can understand it quickly from here as well, but it will be handy if you have the access to these. I mean, I have
Yes,
noted
you are the
down few of
only
the
one
things.
who
Mhm.
has access to it.
You have access,
No,
Karan?
sir, I said you are the only one who has access to it because we don't.
Oh, you don't have it access. Oh, that's fine. No. But in case if you have any access in the latest part of your career, right, you can just refer these documents as well. I mean, I'm just mentioning like which are the courses which I'm just opening from the Guidewire portal. Okay, which is needed for this fundamentals actually. Okay, so I'm just starting with it actually. So basically, right, Guidewire is actually a three-tier architecture. Okay, it is having a data tier where we store all the datas which are relevant for this Guidewire, right? We call it as an application database, right? And the second one is basically the application tier. Okay, so this is where the Guidewire comes into picture. Say for example, you have a PCFs, goes to enhancement classes, all those things, right? So integration calls, everything will happen inside this application server basically. And the third one, right, that is coming into the presentation tier where you will display all the things, like right, Mozilla Firefox, Google Chrome, these are the servers basically, right, where we can display what all things we have from the Guidewire actually. So this is the simple three-tier system which we have for the Guideware. Okay, so reading through it, right, the three-tier architecture is a client-server software architecture pattern in which the user interface, functional process logic, data storage, and data access are developed and maintained as independent modules, basically. Okay, so this is not, I mean, confined to PolicyCenter, but this is Guidewire oriented. Okay, I mean, this fundamentals course basically. Okay, so what is basically an application database, right? So which are the databases that Guidewire supports basically? So these are the three, databases which Guidewire supports basically. One is Oracle Enterprise, the second one is Microsoft SQL Server, and the third one is H2 for training and development. This is H2 database. So we will not use H2 database for production or any other higher environments basically. So this is strictly for training and development. And we have Microsoft SQL Server. I think this is the major one. I think which is being used worldwide. And then we have Oracle Enterprise as well. So these are all relational database management systems basically. Okay, so I will give you an example. Okay, say for example, Karan, right? Karan is going to insure a policy, right? So he will be having a name that is his primary insured name, right? Karan. So then this name will be stored somewhere. It has to be stored somewhere, basically, right? If you have a soft copy or anything, right? To retrieve the data, definitely you need to store his name somewhere, right? So that is where this data tier comes into picture. So what all things you present in the, I will just show you this presentation tier, right, where you will be having the display. right? So wherever you have the first name, last name, all those things, you will be having somewhere to input your details in the presentation tire, right? So once Karan inputs his name in the UI, right, that once he click next, or we have different steps where we can save that particular data to the database. It will have a bundle commit. I will go through this bundle commit and all. Don't confuse yourself, but that is a procedure it will be having. Once you input this name, it will be stored to the database, right? So that is where this database comes into picture, and this application type will process that. Basically internally it will be having its own logic, and it will run its own validation, saying, say for example, the database shouldn't get corrupted, right? Say for example, if some validation, say for example, Karan is providing name in such a way, like Karan 5, by mistake, right? Some integers is coming into picture, and integers are not allowed there, then it has to throw a validation error, right? So these kind of logics will be triggered within this application tires, where we'll be having those logics basically. And once it's passed all these handlers, pre-update rules, everything, right, it will get safely saved to the database actually, from where you can retrieve his name anytime actually. So that is the importance of having this data tire. Okay, so that is how these three things are related basically. Okay, so till now, do you have any questions, or I mean, is my pace good, or is it going faster or slower? You can just comment so that I will understand, right, from your feedback.
So Microsoft Azure is the Microsoft SQL Server they use, or a different one?
They can use, I mean, that depends on your client basically. It's all client oriented, right? So which server, because say for example, in my earlier one I was using Microsoft SQL Server, and also I do have worked in Oracle Enterprise as well. So that completely depends on your client actually, to whom you are going to work. So basically, I mean, most of the cases it will be Microsoft SQL Server, but it could differ. It is from
So
case
like,
to case. Yeah.
who integrates the server into Guidewire? Like, which part of the developer team does that? Like integration one or the configuration one?
It's basically, we cannot say like it's an integ or config. That is a different part. The database itself is a different area, right? So I don't think it is an integration one, because when we call about guidewire integration, right, that is between PolicyCenter to different external systems. It's not with the database. Okay, so basically it will
Okay.
come under configuration only, but you will be getting those configuration steps depending on your database. Say for example, if it is a Microsoft SQL Server, definitely they will provide you a document where you need to configure this SQL Server basically, like how you can connect your guidewire, I mean, to this SQL Server. So these there is
Oh,
some steps you need to follow basically for that. But again, that depends
okay.
on your client actually. So that you need not worry. I mean, they will provide you the steps basically, if they
Okay.
want to connect to the database. Okay, that is fine. Yeah. So yeah, so these are the different application servers which we have for the guidewire, which guidewire supports basically. Okay, so WebSphere, WebLogic, Apache Tomcat, JBoss, and Jetty for training and development only. So I mean, from my experience, I've used Jetty for development development purpose, Jetty.xml, right? So if we, I mean, this again, it's case to case actually. It's client to client. So these are all backend things. I mean, that initial thing, right? This will be configured initially, and you need not worry about any of these actually. You will be working on top of these things actually. So they will provide you. I mean, it's all dependent on your client basically, and based on that only it will be gone. So the ideal thing is, like, you will be having two things as a prerequisite for setting up your guidewire. One is JDK and the other one is GRE. So guidewire itself is integrated into IntelliJ IDEA basically. Okay, so I think that is coming in the further slides. So the prerequisites, in the sense, what I meant is, if you want to develop something in the guidewire studio, and if you want to check in something and all, right, so the main prerequisite, it's like, is to set up the studio, you need to have a JRE and JDK, I mean, version, that you can get it from. That again, they will provide you. They will be having, sometimes they will be having a portal, like, Service Central portal, where you can raise request to get these editions, JDK, JRE, and all. Once it is installed in your C drive, then it is fine. Then you need to set some environment variables basically, and there you need to point to this Java home and home. So you will be getting a document for this. I mean, in my experience, in for any clients which I have worked on for this, they will provide you a document, like an onboarding document, from how you need to set up this environment variables and all. But the initial idea, the fundamental rule is, like, you need to get this JRE and JDK first of all into your C drive, and then you need to point that path. You need to set that path in the environment variables actually. Okay, maybe you will have to gain access for this admin thing, right? I mean, you cannot, not all clients will permit you to make changes in the environment variables just like that. So you will be having different AD groups and all, where you'll have to raise a request for this AD groups, and then only you can modify something to that particular environment variables. So that again depends on a client. Okay, so that and all, they will provide you the details like how you can set up those things. But this is the fundamental rule. You need to have JDK, JRE. Then what you need to have is like JIT. JIT is for committing, taking updates, the code repository, right, from where you can get the code. So for all these things you will be needing JIT. So JIT is the widely used one, and SVN is also there, but SVN I don't think many people are using these days. So I think widely used one is JIT, basically JIT subversions. Okay, and you will be having a Bitbucket as well, I believe. Okay, this again, I mean, depends on the client. It's all client dependent. Okay, but you need not worry about all these things. You will be having a document for this actually, depending on which client we are going to work on. So this again, I think I have covered, I believe. So these are the modern web browsers. I think you will be knowing all these things, right? Like Chrome, Firefox. This is not Guidewire dependent, but Guidewire supports all these modern web browsers basically. Okay. Okay, so the configuration of three tiers, right? So database, application server, and user interface. So how these are all interrelated, right? So this is what I meant. I told you, right? We have a UI, right, where you can input your basic information like name, assigned user, created on which date, public ID, all these things, right? So I mean, this is your UI basically, where you can input it. So in the backend, right, what is happening with the Guidewire? So Guidewire is having a PCF architecture basically. Okay, so inside that PCF, you will be having different layers. Say for example, if you want to configure something like a detail view, right, it is going to come under a detail view panel. Basically, we have a detail view panel. Don't worry, we will cover these in detail actually when we cover the PCF architecture. But just to begin with, right, just understand that if you want to configure something in UI like this, we are going in the backend in the PCF, in the Guidewire Studio. We will be having a PCF. So you need to create a DV like this, AB contact summary DV. I mean, the name and all, it is customizable. Don't worry about it. So detail view panel is needed, and inside that detail view panel, right, you will be having input columns basically, where you can provide your different input fields basically, like name, public ID, all these things. And you can call your name from your respective table entity, right? When I say entity, it is going to be the table where you're going to store it basically. Okay, so don't confuse yourself between entity and table. When I say table, that is the layman's I mean talking. But when it comes to the Guidewire, it is entity. I think other cases also we might be using entity, but in Guidewire definitely entity is something which we're using for a table actually as an alternative. Okay, so say for example, just consider in the database we have something like AB contact. This is the table which we have, and AB contact table is having different columns basically. You can consider this as columns, right? Name, public ID, create time, and all. And once you create this database, right, say for example this AB contact entity, right, in the database, this in turn will generate a Java class basically, something like this. So this is not within our control. This Guidewire will generate when you start the server, or when you build the project basically. This will internally get generated, this Java class. Okay, and you don't have any access to this Java class as well. Okay, this is just for the Guidewire's requirement. It's not for your purpose. Okay, you cannot customize or anything on this. If you change something in the entity, that will again reflect in the Java class internally basically. Okay, and yeah, it will follow a gosu code as well. Okay, which is internal basically to this entity. So you need not worry about all these things, but I'm just telling you how this is happening actually. If when you create a new entity, these are the things which is going to get generated. And AB underscore AB contact, right, this is what you will find in the SQL basically. I will take the database as SQL for simplicity. So whenever you create a database like this in the Guidewire Studio, right, this entity like AB contact.eti, this in turn will generate AB underscore AB contact when you configure or when you connect this to the SQL database basically. If you want to retrieve something from this database from the SQL, you will have to query this AB underscore AB contact basically. Okay, so if it is a PolicyCenter, most of the time it is going to be PC underscore basically. Okay, and sometimes it will come under PCX as well. So that again depends on that particular entity. Okay, so mainly it will be PC. Say for example, if you have a policy, it will be PC underscore policy, where you will be having all the details for that policy. Okay. So whenever you input something here, that is going to get saved in this database actually in these columns. Say for example, you have added your name here, like that name is going to reference like an AB contact dot display name, right? So this in turn will understand that name is going to be Robert Smith, right? So one column is created for Robert Smith. And now again, if you create a new contact with some other name, that will be a second column basically. Okay, so that is how it is architectured, or it is configured basically.
Separate row, not
Yeah,
column.
separate. Sorry. This is column actually. Yeah, yeah. So these will be separate rows basically. Okay. So one is for Robert Smith, and the second one, if you create a new name or new contact, definitely it will go to the second row actually. It will. I mean, go and go on forth. Okay. So till now, do you have any other doubts or anything? Because this is a fundamental basically how Guidewire works. Okay, I consider it as no. Okay, this is what I mentioned earlier, like different, right? I mean, when we create separate different contacts, it will come as separate rows like this actually, with different public IDs and create time. Okay, so these are all, it's just the fundamental which I am taking up. We will go through it in detail basically. Okay, don't worry. So yeah, this is just, they're just telling how it is getting generated. Like say for example, if you're inputting something, how it is getting committed to this database. Okay, so yeah. So this, using this, as I told you, right, how you are getting the name, if we have dot notation for this actually. Say for example, if it's an AB contact, it's just an instance of, so this you will create as, say for example, if it's a DV, you will be having an instance of that particular entity here actually. We have two things, one is a required variable and the second one is variable. I mean, you will get we will experience these things when we come into, when it comes in detail with this PCF. But just understand that we are creating a new variable, a new instance for this contact, and from that we are just, calling different things like, display name, where you're going to save your name, public id. I don't think you will use quite often in UI. It's just for the backend purpose. I don't think no one will display it in UI, but it again depends on, your requirements basically. Okay. Okay, so you understood, right? So this is the Guidewire platform basically. Okay, as we mentioned earlier, we have a data model where we have this SQL, H2, all those things, right? It depends on that. User interface again, right? Where we have this PCFs and all those things, and application logic basically, where we have this, validations, all the underwriting rules. Like it decides basically how this has to go, this policy has to go in initially. And ratings, everything will come under application logic. And then we have this integration mechanism, right? So what is the importance of having an integration here? So till now, what all things have explained for the configuration, when I'm saying something as a configuration, right, that is within your policy center or claim center or billing center, right? What all things you do, it is within that particular center, X center, right? But if you want to communicate with a different center, say for example, if policy center needs to fetch some claims, right? I mean, say for example, you have a vehicle and it needs to know what are the hits it has I mean, that has been taken for that particular vehicle, right? I mean, it how many accidents it has happened. So maybe the premiums, everything will be dependent on that score basically, right? Say for example, if your vehicle has not hit any time and it's a brand new vehicle, it's a well maintained vehicle, you need not pay that much of a premium when it comes to your insurance. This bonus, right? Say for example, we have this no claim bonus, right? I will take it as an example, right? So you need to definitely integrate with the claim center to know whether this vehicle has hit or has met with an accident, right? So for that, you need to integrate that particular policy center with claim center so that it will get you the claims. The claim center will tell you, hey, this vehicle has hit multiple times, and we cannot go with a no claim bonus for this vehicle. right? So such kind of things, when it comes to such kind of things, definitely we need to have an integration in place. Okay, so that is where integration comes into picture, where you will have to communicate from between different X centers, like policy center to claim center, policy center to billing center, claim center to billing center. And also say for example, if your rating is external, right? Say for example, earnings is one of the most powerful rating engines which we have, in terms of rating, right? So if you want to get your premiums from an external rating engine, you will have to integrate that particular policy center with the earnings actually, so that you will provide your inputs from the policy center in terms of limits, deductibles, everything you will input. We have JSON, like basically we have JSON for that. We will input your limits, deductibles, everything for that particular coverage and all, right? You will input these particular things as a JSON input. JSON is the most widely accepted one, that is the reason I mentioned JSON. So you will input in forms of JSON, and you will get it in forms of JSON itself. And how you're getting it, right? You are going to call this integration earnings integration point, where you are the earnings will consume your limits and deductibles as an input, and it will provide the premium. It will calculate, it is just having its own earnings rating mechanism. So based on what you have provided, it will calculate the rate, premium, and it will give you. So, and the policy center will consume that particular that particular premium as an output actually. So that is how. So it's just an introduction for the integration. So how does configuration differ from integration, right? So whenever we call it as a configuration, it is within the policy center or within that particular X center. But integration, it is going to communicate between different. It may not be X centers itself. Say for example, if you want to call some court inquiry service or something from some legacy systems, right? You can have a call to that system as well to get different codes from different. It need not be a Guidewire system itself, right? You can get the codes or policies from a different uh, platform as well. So these kind of things are possible with the integration mechanism. Okay, so this is what I mentioned earlier. We have different layers, right? Application specific functionality basically. So this is claims basically. I think financials, group access, claim maturity, these are all claims related, I think. And this one, right, product model. So product model basically is nothing but, say for example, the product policy lines, all these things we need in terms of policy center. When it comes to policy center, the initial one is product basically. Okay, say for example, homeowners, right? Homeowners is going to be a product, and then you will be having a line for that particular policy line for that particular product, right? So these kind of things are configured inside the product model. So I will take this product model in detail as well. We have a detailed session for that as well, but this is just the initial one. And then we have a job flow, right? Say for example, initially you have created an account is a must, right? Initially you will be creating an account in policy center. Then for that particular account you are going to create a policy, right? Then how what happens is, like, different job flows, it continues from that. One is, right, new submission, right? So whenever you create a new code, it is going to be new submission. Then it will be in draft status, right? Initially it will be in draft status, where you are provisioned to edit anything, right, in that particular quote basically. Once you quote it, and once you rate and quote it, you will be getting the premium, and it will be non-editable. Still you have an option to edit that particular transaction. So these are different types of that particular code flows basically, right? And and ultimately you can bind and issue that particular policy, where the policy is finalized. Okay, and then if you want to make some change to that particular submission, right, you can go for a policy change. So I believe we have that also. That session is also coming. So this is, just briefing our course outline, right? So we are just starting with this architecture and components of the Guidewire platform. I think we have covered this almost. And then we have the system prerequisites and setup, right, which I have mentioned, the JDK, JRE, JIT, all those things, and configuring server environments, initial configuration, deployment, right? So this is the basic thing which we need as a Guidewire, as a Guidewire developer, right? Like, what all things we need as a Guidewire developer, that is what I have explained. So till now, do you have any questions or doubts? We can discuss that in 5 minutes, and otherwise we can move further to policy center.
We're all good, sir.
Okay.
No
Swati and
doubts from my
no
end.
doubts.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, good. My pace is okay, right? I mean, am I too fast or am I too slow? I just wanted to know, is it good or
It's perfect. It's perfect.
okay?
For me, it's fine.
Okay, then it's fine.
It's okay for
So,
me.
okay, okay.
It's like a revision for
I understand. Yeah, you can correct me as well if
no
I'm
problem.
doing wrong. Okay, yeah, okay, fine. So yeah, the second one I will just go with policy center, right? So this is the prime part. I mean, where we are all interested, right? As a policy center guidewire developer, so the introduction to the policy center, right? So far, what all things we have explained, I've explained, right? That is regarding guidewire actually, in as a whole, irrespective of which X center, right? Like a policy center, claim center, or billing center, this is applicable for everything, all these things. Okay. Now we are specifically going into this, that policy center basically. Okay. So I'll just will start with the policy center basically, right? So what do you mean by policy center basically, right? So I will take an example. Say, for example, we want to insure our car, right? That is the most, I mean, most likely to insure. If, say, for example, not if not house, right? Definitely you will insure your car because that is more prone to accidents and everything, right? So if you want to insure your car, where is policy center's role coming into picture, right? So you need to, first of all, you need to have a policy for that, right? Then only this claims and billings and everything comes into picture. So the prime thing is you need to have an account for that, right? If you want to get a policy, definitely you need to have an account, first and foremost thing. Okay. So when it comes to policy center, the first entity which you need to get familiarized is the account actually. Okay. This is the first account, first entity which you need to get familiarized with. Okay. One account can have multiple policies. Okay. And an account will be having an account holder name as well.
Firstly, ask them if they are familiar with what entity is.
Yeah, that is what I have explained earlier, right? Entity is the
Yeah,
synonym of
I'm okay with it.
yeah, table actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Layman's term, it is table, but entity
Yeah.
means it's a table basically. Say, for example, if it SQL, right? In
So
SQL,
entity
we
is like anything, any column of it, right?
no,
Any
it's a table.
No,
specific.
It's a
entity is
table.
not a column.
Yeah.
Entity
Okay.
is a
Columns
table.
are fields basically. Yeah. The
It's like
different
a full
fields.
table.
Exactly. Yeah. One whole table which you find it in the SQL, right? That is one
Okay.
entity. And within entity,
Okay.
you will be having different fields or columns actually. So those are different
Yeah.
fields. Say, for example, display name, age, everything, right? So these are the
Okay.
different, yeah, different fields which you find it in the SQL as well. Okay.
So
So
in
that is
Guidewire, like they when they store data, like all the customers are stored in like one data set, or there are like different tables for each customer.
no, that again depends on a client actually. But it, say for example, if you have an account, right? That account
Uh-huh.
holder will be having certain policies, right? So all these things are related actually with foreign keys and different keys we have. So say for example,
Okay.
if you are having a policy and I am having a policy, your policy and my policy will not be related anyhow because it is having
Okay.
its own keys, foreign keys actually, because you are having a different account, right? So definitely you
Okay.
cannot have it in the same table basically, right? that won't
Okay.
that
Okay.
won't happen actually. Yeah. So the accounts can have multiple, I mean your I mean your row, my row, all these rows will be having, I mean we can have different rows in the same account table. But when it comes to the policy or different other specific entities, right, it will deviate from there. So my account row will be connected with my own policies, right? Policy entities and all, not yours,
Yeah.
right? Don't, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is what, yeah. So the rows will be same in account level, but it
That
will
my
be
question was like, is there any specific table created for each client,
no, no,
or
no, no,
like
no.
there's like generic table? Yeah, that's
It,
all I
it
wanted to ask.
it will be different. It will be generic, I believe, in that case. But again, client can request. It again depends on the clients. Actually, we cannot specifically mention that. But again, right? I mean, most probably it
Okay.
will be same. So, for example, if it's SQL,
Okay.
it's SQL. That's it. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so what is an account, right? So when it comes to policy center, first thing is you need to have, if you want to have a policy, definitely you need to have an account actually. Okay, so for that account, you need to have an entity. You need to create an entity. So don't worry, when you get your access to this guidewire itself is having all these entities, out of the box entities. We call it out of the box. So you cannot have a guidewire platform where you don't find an account entity, because that is one entity which is created by the guidewire itself. Okay, so And also, if you want to modify something to that account also, I will tell you what needs to be done. You cannot simply go and change a guidewire provided entity basically. Okay, so account, policy, period, policy, all these entities are guidewire provided. Those are called out of the box entities basically. Okay, out of the box. And the entities which you are going to create based on your client's requirements, right, that is being called as custom entities actually, where you can just create it without an underscore ext, and you can just go with your own nomenclature and everything with respect to the policy line. Okay, so the fundamental thing is you need to have an account for any policies to be created. Then what is the flow actually? Once you get an account, right, you need to have a policy. So what is it actually? That policy will be tagged to some policy line as well, right? Because say for example, if it is a personal auto policy, it has to be tagged to a line, a policy line actually. So that is personal auto line basically, right? So you need to have an entity for this personal auto line as well. Okay, so you have an entity for that policy line. So account is one entity, then you have an entity for policy line, then you need to hold the value, hold all the details of that particular policy, right? So that is where policy.eti, policy entity, will come into picture. And once you have a policy, right, you can again go for a policy change, right? You have issued and bounded a policy. Now if you want to change a particular policy, then one entity comes into picture, that is the most important entity, and that is called policy period entity. Okay, policy period entity basically. So don't worry, we have a separate session for these transactions as well. I mean, this entity data model and all, this is just the start. Okay, just to begin with actually, this is the introduction. So account, right? Okay. So yeah, as I told you, right, one account can have multiple policies. That is what they have illustrated here. So who can have an account? It can either be a person or company. So these things and all, right, you can define in the product designer as well. Okay, I mean, company, person, this line of business, right? When you create something that can be tagged to that particular company or person, all these things you can define over there as well. So this is the basic thing. An account can, I mean, who can consume an account, who can create an account, right? It can either be a personal account or a company's account. Okay, and then we can have a personal account like this and business account. This is company's account basically. And one person may be associated with multiple accounts as well. That's also possible actually. Okay, and accounts can have 0, 1, or many associated policies as well. I told you, right? You can just create a simply, you can simply create an account without any policies. You can have one policy or you can have many policies actually. Okay, that is possible. But one policy cannot have multiple accounts. It can be tagged to one and only account. Okay, that is another thing. So this is another thing, like, what do you mean by producer, right? So producer is something which who will bring the business actually. Say for example, what I would say, there are different, different parties which markets and gets the business to the insurer, right? So say for example, in my case, if insurer is Zurich North America, then you will be having a producer who will get a policy or account for this insurer basically. Okay, so a third party who brings business to the insurer, he is termed as producer basically. Okay, and insured is nothing but we ourselves. I mean, say for example, if Karan is asking for a policy, then Karan will be the insured one. And if that I mean, Zurich North America is the client, right, then insurer will be Zurich North America basically. And this will be a producer, like who is in touch with Karan to get this business for this Zurich North America, and that is going to be the producer actually. Okay, that is the basic and fundamental thing. And these are different, things which are getting surrounded with this account in the policy center. And these are termed as supporting information, right? Say for example, you just created a quote, right, and you just issued the policy. Certain documents has to be generated, right? Say for example, you need to print that premium page, right? If you want to print something related to that particular state, say for example, New Jersey, right? If you're I mean, yeah, if a policy is getting created in New Jersey, say for example, and New Jersey is having its own, amendments or its own declarations, which has to be documented, you can store it in documents as well, so that we know what is related to this. I mean, what are all documents that are related to this particular policy. Okay, and it can have also have history of changes. History in the sense, say for example, you can have a policy change to that particular policy, you can have a cancellation, you can cancel that policy, you can reinstate. All these things comes under history basically. And also you can have some notes as well. There is a provision to add notes to that particular account or policy. That is also possible. We will discuss all these things in further. Related accounts are also there for that particular account, right? Policies and underwriting files, submission manager. So these things and all we will discuss in further details. Okay, transactions nothing but as I discussed, policy changes, different transactions basically, renewals. You can renew a policy, right? Once it is going to expire. Say for example, your policy is annual, right? Say for example, Jan 1st 2025 you have taken a policy, and Jan 1 2026, or 1 month before, you will get notification saying like, hey, you will have to renew your policy. And you can opt for auto renewal as well. And you might have experienced from your own experience, right? I mean, if you have a car, and or if you have a home, you want to renew that policy. I mean, you have taken a policy, you will have to renew that particular policy, and you will get reminders from your insurer, right, saying like, hey, Vaishnav, your policy is about to expire, do you mind renewing the policy with. Sometimes, when you're renewing that quote, or the premium might change. It all depends on that particular, time to time it might change. So all these things are happening, and it will be happening within the policy center. So we have a separate workflow for all these things. Say for example, if it is renewal, right, renewal will go in its own workflow basically, where it is going to get you that particular premiums, all these things. Or sometimes they won't be needing any change itself, it will be just a replica, right? I mean, it can happen if we have inflation, all these things, right? Okay, that is applicable to insurance as well, right? Time to time their premium changes, all these things are applicable here. So it's a bit complex, but in a way it's simple as well actually, once you get to know what are the things actually. And participants are nothing but, I, as I've told you, producers is one thing, underwriters, right, who will review your policy, and who will say for example, sometimes your policy will have to go through underwriting approval process, because sometimes your CIBIL score might be down and you're not eligible for taking this policy with this premium. So at that time, right, underwriters will comes into picture, and he will be having more knowledge. He will analyze your policy thoroughly, and then he will make a decision whether this guy will have to increase his premium so that he's eligible. His CIBIL score is so and so, then he's having so and so claims, actually he's hit with multiple accidents, whether he needs to increase his premium, or whether he is not at all eligible for the policy itself. So all these things will be taken care by underwriters actually. So underwriter is some other participant, agents are there, producers are there, so these are MSRs are there. So these are different participants basically. Okay, and locations are nothing but, we have different areas where your policies can get impacted, right? We have different addresses, all these things. So this is another entity which we can say, which we have. And contact is nothing but, the different contacts that are linked to that particular policy or account. Say for example, when it comes to account, you have an account holder, right? That account holder cannot be multiple people. It will be one only for an account, right? So the account holder, when you create a policy from that particular account, your primary named insured for that particular policy by default will be your account holder itself. Okay, so these are different contacts, and you can have additional named insured, you can have multiple drivers, all these things, right? This contacts will grab all these things that will come under this contacts actually. So this in turn is kind of an integration with contacts. I mean, we have a separate contact mechanism actually, so we can call it that way as well. We have separate storage for this contacts as well. Okay, so this is basic about this accounts actually, and what are all the things which are circulating around this accounts actually. Till now, do you have any questions? Okay, and then I will go to the next slide. Yeah, any doubts?
No, no, no. It's all good.
Okay. Okay, then I will go to the next. I think we'll start with. So, I mean, just to familiarize, right? We have this is what I call it as an account summary dashboard. Okay, so once you create an account, you can see all these things here. One is account number and all. You need not create anything. You need not type anything. Once you create a new account, this will come. That system will automatically generate, or it will increment basically. Say for example, if you have created an account like this, and second time next person who is going to create an account might be having 106 here, right? So that is what, and ssn number will be there. So these are different fields coming under this, this account summary page. Okay, and account holder, this is our name, who created that account basically, right? And then the address of that particular account holder. So I mean, these are all, once you get familiarized with this, you will get to know. The UI familiarization is very important actually. And then you have this activities basically. So we will discuss about these activities, billing, all these things basically. Okay, but just understand that this is the account summary dashboard. So once you create an account, what all things that are related to that particular account, right, you can see it over here actually. And the history, billing, claims, all the things, policy transactions, how many policies are there, what are the what are all the policy transactions that has been undergone in this account, all these things you will get to know here actually. Okay, yeah. So how, okay, I mean, this is a demonstration. Okay, that is fine. I mean, if you want I can just play it, but okay, I will just, let me see if I can play this. Oh. Is the video audible for you?
It's not.
That's fine. That's fine. I will just tell you. Okay. Okay. So I will give you that. Audio thing. Okay. So this is.
So, so are there like lectures inside this training center, like the policy center?
Wait a minute. 1 minute. Yeah. So they're logging into this, policy center. So this is the user interface for the policy center. Okay. So the username and password can vary. It could be, SUGW. It varies again. Okay. These things and all we can just configure actually, username, password and all. Okay. No need to worry. We have a separate entity. We have admin data for that, where you can, configure super user or anything, any users like that. Okay. So they are just logging in as some user. Okay. So they logged in. So once they log into the policy center, right, we have, a drop. So all these things you need not configure or anything, because these are all guidewire, developed thing actually. So any client, if they give you the guidewire software or guidewire platform, right, so by default you will find all these things. These are all guidewire provided actually. You may customize it in a later stage. Say for example, you don't want this drop down for any of the producers or any of the, underwriters or any other users, right? You can hide this based on the roles and permissions. So that is possible. Anything is possible, but by default you can see all these things which is guidewire provided basically. That is my point. Okay, so you have a drop down for account like this here. So they're going to click it, and once they click this drop down, right, you have an option for this new account here actually. They're clicking this new account. Okay, then once they enter this new account, when I mean, from a developer's perspective, this is a PCF basically, right? And it might be having a detailed view basically, as I mentioned earlier, right? We will come to it, but I'm just trying to correlate things actually. So this is a UI level, and from a developer's perspective, when you check this page in the studio, you will be having a PCF where, you have a screen, all these things, and you will be having a detailed view where you have all these things, and this is going to be maybe account, right? The entity is going to be account, and company name, all these things can derive from that account using dot notation, like account dot display name or something. Okay, that is what I meant. Yeah. So they're just inputting that values, like first name. Yeah. And they're just searching if someone is having this Tom Newton, right? If he's having already an account basically with his name, that is what they're trying to search it. So search returned zero results. So this is going to be fresh account, right, with this name actually. So that search, that check they have done here. And then already also they have this create new account tab here, and here I've informed you earlier, right? We have company, person, or from the advice book. These two options are there. So you can design this account is going for a company or a person, basically. Okay. So they are going to choose it as person because it is for one person, actually, not for any organization. Okay. And then once you create that person, you have this, all the details. This is again a detail view basically with all the details like address, mobile number, last name, first name, nickname, all these things. These asterisks, right, these red ones are the mandatory ones. Without providing these values in this asterisk, you cannot proceed further. It will throw a validation error, and that validation error itself will be out of the box. Like you need not, you need not configure that error message. If you find something as an asterisk, that means it is required field. And if you don't provide a value there, and if you click next, Guidewire will throw out of the box error message saying like, hey, you didn't provide this so and so details, and your first name is missing or something like that. Okay, so that is the importance of having an asterisk. That means, this also we are configuring from the PCF level. Okay, we have properties for this where the required is going to be true here. It's a Boolean thing. I will explain all this, and don't worry. Okay, so yeah, and they're just inputting the values, all these things. Yeah, and then they're just searching for this organization name. So organization name they will be getting from the admin data. They got that admin data as well. They got that organization name as well. So yeah, they got that organization, and they are choosing the producer code here actually. They are just creating the update. And so this is what, right, once they have created that account, you will see all these things. It doesn't have any policies or policy terms or claims or anything, because it's a freshly created policy account, right? Sorry, account, and no activities as such, right? So that is what I meant. It's a pretty new account. That is the reason you don't find it. But once you start creating new submission, this is where you're going to create a new policy, new submission. Then it will come under this open policy transactions. So that is what you'll get to know further. Okay, so this is the basic thing of an account. I think yeah, that is, yeah, you can withdraw that account as well. Like you have an option for that as well. You can reopen. We have different options basically. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So that is it about the account creation actually. So till now, do you have any doubts actually creating a new account?
No doubts from me.
No. So supporting account information is nothing but, I don't think we need this video. It is nothing but, as I've discussed earlier, that history, that forms, everything, right, which support that particular account, you will be seeing there, in the account actually. Okay, I don't think we need to dwell into it. So these are all a few questions. I don't think we need questions as well. So I will move on to policy transactions now as a second step. So as so far you don't have any, you have got an idea about account, right? What an account is basically, right? And how significant an account is in the policy center, right? Okay, I will move on to policy transactions now. So this is an overview of the policy transaction basically, right? So till now so far we have discussed about account, nothing specific to any policy, right? So now within that account you can create a policy. You have an option to create a new policy basically, and you can choose your that particular line of business. All these things you can choose when you create a new submission basically. Okay, so that is called a new submission basically. Okay, so policy is created with new submission. So you have a policy entity, then policy is created as a new submission. So this submission, policy change, renewal, cancellation, all these things, right, these transactions comes under an entity called job actually. So these are different jobs performed for that particular policy actually, right? So within the policy you have different jobs basically, right? So these are all different jobs: policy change, renewals, cancellation, reinstatement, everything. So we'll start with a new submission. So you have a new submission in place. You have it in the draft status where you're bound to input your own details, your own all values. Say for example, if it is person auto line, you can input your vehicles, driver details, insure details, additional named insure details, your coverages, right? What are all the coverages that are related to your particular that particular policy, personal auto policy. All these things you can input it in the draft status basically, and then you're going to quote it basically to get the quote basically, right? Rate and quote it. So once you rate and quote it, all the rating engines, everything will work it out for you, and you will be getting a premium basically, like so and so premium you'll have to pay it actually, right? Now, when you quote it, also you can get an underwriting. You can throw an underwriting issue. So underwriting issue is nothing but if this needs to be reviewed by an underwriter. Say for example, the system will analyze it, and if you have designed an underwriting issue or underwriting rule, saying like hey, this if so and so condition fails, you need to throw this underwriting rule, and then the underwriter will have to review it and he will have to decide it basically. It cannot go for an automatic approval basically, right? So if all the data, everything which you have provided is within the limits, then no need of an underwriting rule, right? You can just go and issue that policy basically, right? So that is what. So it does have its own different layers basically
So
when it comes to the policy.
the
Yeah,
underwriter is not required in every case.
not needed actually. That is what, right? I mean, if your policy is foolproof, say for example, you don't have any issues with the policy, you don't have
Oh,
any
okay.
underwriting issues or anything, right?
Okay.
You need not be
Like
having
if
an underwriter involved in it
yeah,
actually.
for example, like if someone never met with an accident, so they don't need to check with the underwriter that we can give the policy or not, right?
Yeah, that is needed. I mean, that is what, right? When it comes to some odd cases, definitely underwriter will have to review it. So if he met with an accident, definitely policy center will have to integrate with the claim center, right, to get the FNOL, all the
No, no,
details
no.
actually.
So, I'm saying like if somebody is trying to get a policy and
Hmm.
they have met with like multiple accidents in their past, and
Hmm.
the policy center like they're gonna review it, right? If we gonna issue
Exactly,
the
exactly.
policy or not, right? So then the underwriter is required. But
That
if
is
the
what.
person says
I understand.
so,
Yeah,
so like, yeah, if the person have never met with an accident, so he ticks the column no, then the underwriter is not required. That's what you're
exactly.
saying.
Exactly. So that is what
Okay.
you can design your own underwriter rules basically, like when it has to be triggered, right? So based on that rules only, this underwriting rules will trigger, and then only this will go for the approval actually. So without
And
this,
who is
Hmm,
responsible for the underwriting rules, like the configuration developer or the
exactly.
company?
We have a separate uh,
Configuration.
configuration.
Configuration
Yeah.
development.
So we have a separate section for that, like underwriter rule section actually, right? So where we are going to configure our own underwriting rules. We will be inputting our own logics, so that if so and so logic is met, definitely we need to throw this underwriting rule. Maybe at time of quote, maybe at time of issuance, bind. It can differ actually. We have a pre-check and pre-quote. We have different checking sets and blocking points for that particular underwriting rules actually. Okay.
And who give these rules like to us? Somebody must have instructions sent to us, right? The business analyst or like who does that?
Yeah, definitely business analyst, right? It all comes from the requirements actually. For a developer's perspective, right? From a developer's perspective, everything will have to be documented. Say, for example, even if it's a label change from an underwriting rule, right? It has to be approved from the client and it has to come through proper channel. You will be having Excel sheet or something where all this error message, everything. I mean, the underwriting rule, everything, right? Will be documented. So even a label change or any typo mistake in that configuration is going to result in the defect basically, trivial defect. Okay, so
Oh,
definitely whatever change is meant or whatever underwriting rule has to be triggered, definitely it has to come from the business analyst. So they will decide. Discussing with the client, they will decide whether we need to throw an underwriting rule or a validation, or how we need to, block this quote from being issued. Then we will get the requirement, and then based on the requirement we will be configuring this underwriting rule. One good thing about underwriting rule is, you need not, you can deactivate that underwriting rule, or you can just deactivate the underwriting rule from the UI basically. Even a business analyst can do it actually. Okay, you need not go through that code base. There is no need of a developer as such if it is an underwriting rule.
oh,
But if it's a
This is
validation,
the latest version. I think that they have
yeah,
made
exactly.
this
Version
change.
10, yeah, version 10,
Version
yeah,
10, yeah.
exactly, yeah. So I
and
mean,
this
most,
Version
what is this
8, it
mammoth
was
thing? Like
different.
I got an email from Guidewire education team that they are teaching something about the mammoth. Like what's that?
mhm.
So, like what is
Actually,
that? And I don't know about.
Guidewire will release its own, right now, because they are upgrading their releases. Each release they will update something. So, I am certified till last Lenas. I think last Lena is the latest one, I believe. So
Yeah,
Guidewire
last
will
Lenas
notify,
was
yeah, yeah.
latest.
So Guidewire will notify you whenever there is a release from Guidewire, right? They will include some other changes, some new changes with each release, basically. Like Hakoba will be having new release, new changes, new features. Then last learners, so they will add on their, they're also in a research mode, right? Guidewire is also researching their own.
Current, so it's basically like from after version 10, they started with A, B, C, D, and for every alphabet, they are having one release. A
Exactly.
was Aspen, B was Banff,
Mm.
Cortina, Dobson. So similarly, now they have reached L, Las Vegas, and Mammoth is the next release, which is expected in April 2025.
Yeah, I think it is yet to be done, yet to come, I believe.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And what
I
kind of
think.
changes
Yeah.
they make into these softwares? Like, are there like big differences which one have to learn?
Most of the time, it is APD related, like advanced product designer related, because recently they are mostly, interested in this advanced product design, because it's all cloud based now, Guidewire, right? So I think
Yeah.
till last Lenas, they have upgraded, or they have done their own research, and they have made new changes to this advanced product designer. So Mammoth, I'm not sure what they're including, but till last Lenas, as from my experience, I think it is all APD related, advanced product designer, cloud related actually.
And also they've changed the method in which we do certifications. So initially specialist certification was an open book exam. Now it's going to be proctored.
It's
Hmm.
going to be proctored.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And every update, whenever the update comes, we have to take the exam again.
it's not
No, we have to do new features only.
new features. I don't think it is proctored, I believe, right?
No. New features
Yeah,
is not proctored.
it's not
I'm
proctored.
talking
Yeah.
of like this ACE
Hmm.
exam and
Got it. Yeah, ASSL
those are
exam
the
is definitely
those are the proctored
proctored. Yeah,
ones.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that too, that is
And you
restricted.
said like we can't take this ACE exam without the company access,
Yeah.
or we can.
Cannot.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to this actually. So the initial step is submission actually, and then once you are good with the submission, right, you have issued and bound your code, it will result in a policy basically. After you have issued that particular code, okay. So now you have a policy. We have a policy number as well. Till then, you will be having a code number only. Once you have quoted a policy, you don't have a policy number as such. Okay, you will be having just have a quote number actually. So once you have bounded and issued that particular policy, you will be having a policy number now. Okay. Now, say for example, if you want to change something to that particular policy, you cannot just go and edit it, right? If it was in quoted status, you could have edited that quote actually. But now it is already issued. That policy is already issued, right? Say for example, 1st Jan 2025, I have created a submission, and in July 1st, 2025, I wish to add my wife's name as well, because I'm married, right? I'm married now. So if you want to make any change to that particular policy, this policy change comes into picture. Okay. So policy change also is having different its own flavors actually. Say for example, flat policy change is there, midterm policy change is also there, right? So flat policy change is nothing but from day one itself they are going for a policy change after issuing that particular policy. And midterm policy change is nothing but, between that particular term. Say, for example, from 1st Jan 2025 to 1st Jan 2026, the expiry date, right? Between these two dates, if you're going for any change in that particular policy, that is called midterm policy change, actually. Okay, if you want to make any change to that particular policy, that also comes in different layers. Say, for example, once you initiate the policy change, that initial workflow will be in draft status, basically. So policy change draft status, right? Then you can make your own changes. All the fields will be editable, or you can also control that editability with users and permissions. Okay, so for example, in with respect to that particular transaction, if policy change, this field shouldn't be editable, you can control that also. Anything is possible with that code logic. Okay, so now policy change is in draft standards. I have added my spouse name. Now I want to bound and issue it, right? Same thing. You're going to rate and code that particular policy change. You will be getting a new premium, and then you're going to bound and issue it. And during policy change, also you can trigger the underwriting rules if needed. Say, for example, if spouse is added, some underwriting rule has to be triggered, right? You can design your own underwriting rule for that particular policy or policy line, and then it will be getting triggered. Then it will go for the underwriting rule approval. I mean, underwriter approval. He will either approve or reject that particular policy. And so such kind of things are applicable for all the transactions. Okay, underwriting rule. So this is policy change. Okay. So with respect to submission or policy change, do you have any doubts till now? Okay, so I will go with further transactions, right? So we are good with submission as well as policy change, right? Now comes the renewal part, right? So renewal is nothing but, as I mentioned earlier also, maybe it could be annual, right? So for example, your policy is annual, okay, and June 1st 2025 policy is going to expire on June 1st 2026, right? So before that, the renewal workflow will start, basically. Okay, it could be auto renewal as well. So renewal workflow will start for that particular policy, maybe 3 months or 2 months earlier. It depends on your requirement. And then the renewal the workflow will start, and you will be getting a renewal in draft status, basically. Okay, it will trigger automatically. You need not create it manually, but you can create it manually as well, this renewal. So similarly, right, just like how you create a policy change for that particular policy, you have a drop down for that, and you can start for the renewal as well. Okay, you can, so once you start the renewal, again it will be in draft status. You can quote it, you can renew that particular policy as well manually. So it's possible manually, but most of the time, right, for the renewal it will be automatic workflow. So by that particular timeline, it will trigger the renewal workflow. A renewal job will run, the workflow will run. It will create a renewal submission, I'm sorry, not submission, renewal job, and then it will issue it at the time, actually, if everything goes. So if it is not renewed, what happens, basically, it will end, the policy is going to end there. If it is getting renewed, that policy will continue for another term, right? Maybe by I mean, it could be different. It need not be annual itself. It could be biannual. I mean, it can vary, actually. Okay, it could be 2 years. It could be 1 year. That again depends on your client's requirements, basically. Okay, we can control it, actually. So that is all about renewals as well. And also we can provide a pre-renewal direction as well. Say, for example, some hold is needed for that particular transaction, I mean the policy, right? So you can create a, on hold request for that particular renewal as well. So that is also possible. Like you found some payment issue, or say, for example, your home is located in Illinois, and in Illinois is facing some earthquake or something, and at this particular time, policies will have to be kept on hold. Some exceptional cases, right? So you will have to hold that particular policies from getting renewed. So these are all possible, right? I mean, in real world, these are all possible, basically. And that insurer may not be able to provide you the insurance when at the time of renewal with the same premium for the same reason, right? It's prone to earthquake now. Illinois is more prone to earthquake now, so the premium has to go higher. So these kind of things can happen. So at the time, you can stop. I mean, we can keep these renewals on hold as well. So that is my point, actually. Okay. So these are all possible, and these are all Guidewire provided. You need not configure separately for this. It's all Guidewire provided things. Okay. Now cancellation, right? Say, for example, you don't want this policy at all. You have taken this policy, maybe after 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you thought, like, there is a better policy with more benefits, right? You don't want this policy at all. you can try to cancel that policy. Definitely, cancellation charge will come into picture. I mean, the premiums and all right, but it will prorate and it will give you the reduced premium. I mean, or the charge it is going to take for that particular cancellation, and then that again will be in draft status. You can check, you can quote it, and you can see what is the cancellation premium that I will have to pay for it. And then once you code that particular cancellation, and once you bind it, you have cancelled it actually, and you will be getting some refund as well, right? I mean, but you might not be getting the whole premium as refund, but you will be getting and premium as refund with prorated. Actually, it will be prorated actually. Okay. And cancellation again, there are two types actually. One is flat cancellation where you're going to cancel it straight away, and the other one is midterm. So it can again depends. It depends on the dates which you're choosing the cancellation. Okay. And then once you have cancelled a policy, right? Say for example, you wish to reinstate it. Say for example, okay, I want to reopen this, or I just wanted to, just pause and play it. So that is the difference between reinstatement and rewrite, basically. Okay, reinstatement means none of the pages you can see any field is editable. Actually, you won't be finding any usual pages in the reinstatement one. Okay, you're just reopening that particular policy which you have cancelled. You cannot change anything within the reinstatement. Okay, you uh, just consider it as pause and play. Okay, that is what I would say. So you have a live submission going on. It's playing. You suddenly you are pausing it, and then you are playing it again. Okay. Likewise, you can consider. What is
So
rewrite
like
basically? Yeah.
if I have a question, like if
Mhm.
somebody skips their premium, right, but
Hmm.
they are into the grace period
Hmm.
and they want the policy to be continued, like which one will be done, the reinstatement or rewrite?
No, reinstatement comes into picture only when you are canceling a policy. Actually, you will have to cancel that particular policy.
So if the
Okay.
policy gets automatically cancelled and they are in
Okay.
the grace period, right?
Okay.
Somebody doesn't pay the premium,
Okay.
then which one will come into play, like
Reinstatement,
rewrite or
definitely
re?
it is reinstatement actually. Rewrite is, you can consider it as a new submission itself, but it is not a new submission. But rewrite as such, it is having all the essence of a new submission basically. Like you will be finding what all things are there for a new submission, right? Say for example, you have multiple changes to be made for that particular policy. Say for example, you have cancelled the policy, right? Now you wish to make multiple changes to that cancelled policy. Okay, before rewrite, I mean reinstating or rewriting it, right? Then you definitely you'll have to go with a rewrite so that you have provision to change all the fields when you rewrite it actually. That is
Especially
important to keep that.
changes like producer code change
Exactly.
that is
Yeah.
not possible in a policy change. That
Yeah.
time after cancellation you have to rewrite the policy.
Rewrite it definitely. Yeah. That is what. So rewrite has got its own flavor, but
Rewrite is like taking with the new coming with up with a new policy, right?
it's not a new policy. But say for example, you have a new policy. Okay, you are canceling that particular policy. Now you already have all the details of that particular policy, right? So now, if you're rewriting it, already you have all the details of that particular policy. And if you wish to change something to that particular policy, as I mean, you mentioned, right? I mean, if it is producer code, if you want to change a producer code, you don't want this producer at all. That producer is not good for you. It's something like that, right? If you want to wish to change something like that, you are going to go for a rewrite. New submission is different, right? So if it's a new submission, you don't have any data as such. You will have to input everything by your own actually, right? But here you already have the data from the new submission. You already have copied everything from the new submission. Now, if you wish to change something to that particular policy, you can make a change. But reinstatement, you cannot make any change. You're just pausing and playing it again. That is the difference. You
Okay.
got my point, right?
Yes, yes, I got it.
Okay. Yeah, till now, do we have any questions? Still policy transactions. Any section which I'll have to take again or something? Okay, I guess you're understanding. Okay, so this again, right? I mean, as I've mentioned earlier, the lifespan of a policy, right? So this is a policy term basically, like new submission. Consider new submission. You're starting it on 1st Jan 2025. So this is the effective date of that particular policy, where the policy is going to be in effect. You're issuing that particular policy on that particular date. Now it is going to expire after some time, right? That is a policy term. That is one policy term of that particular policy. Okay. So if it is an annual policy, it is going to expire on what? 1st Jan 2026, right? So that is one policy term of that particular policy. Okay. Now again, if you're going for a renewal, that is the second policy term. That is a renewal term. Okay. And that renewal term also will be having its own expiry date. So if the effective date is and if the policy is annual, and if the effective date is 1st Jan 2025, it is getting expired on 1st Jan 2026, right? So what will be the expiry date for that renewal term? Basically, it will be coming in 2027 only, right? It should be, because it is annual, first year and this is the second year. So that is how we can understand this logic actually. Okay. So yeah, the length of time a policy is in force is determined by the effective date and expiration date. That is the thing, right? If you minus expiration date, if you minus effective date from expiration date, you will be getting that span actually, how long this policy is in effect, basically. Okay. So the time between these two dates is the policy term. So this is the policy term. So example, 6 months or 1 year. That again depends on your client's requirement. Okay. The period of time when the policy is in effect. So that is what, right? I mean, till this time, this policy is in effect basically. You can cancel it here actually, this point. What will happen if you cancel this point? So this will become its expiry, right? That is what. So this policy term will be active till here only, this point where I am marking it. And from here to here, there is no policy at all. So that is how we can analyze it actually. Okay. So during the life of the policy, one or more transactions can occur that changes the policy. That is like policy change or cancellation, reinstate, rewrite. All these things can happen during this span, and also renewals as well, right? Yeah. So this is nothing but the same thing, I believe, the policy term, right? That so the this is where the policy period also comes into picture. So the policy term and the policy period are not the same thing. That is one thing, okay, which we'll have to understand. Because one policy term, say for example, this is one policy term, right? This is one policy term. So policy term in the sense effective date and expiration date. Say for example, you're going for a policy change here actually, okay, and then the effective date and expiration date of that particular policy remains the same, but you have two different policy periods here. So the new submission is effective from here till here, and from here you have a policy change. So you have two policy periods now actually. That is what they are mentioning here. So you have two different policy periods but within the same policy term. So here you're going for a policy change, right? Split off that particular period. So are you getting confused between this policy term and policy period? I can explain further. Or are you good with this policy period?
So the policy period will be the period issued on the insurance policy, right? Like a year or something.
If you don't have any change, that is true. If you don't have any change in the policy term, your policy term and policy period is going to be same. Okay. But the problem is, say for example, if you have a policy change here after some time, say for example, if you take this one, right, midterm, if you're going for a policy change, okay, you will be having two policy periods here, one for the new submission and the second one for the policy change. So the new submission will be expiring here actually, right? The policy period is what I meant, not policy term. Okay. So in the new submissions expiration date, the new submissions policy period will expire here at this point, and the policy change effective date will start from this point and it will expire here actually. So that is where policy period comes into picture. So if there are no other changes, policy terms, effective date and expiration date will be same as policy periods, effective date and expiration date, and that will be that of the new submission. But if you have any change between this policy term, right, between these periods, like cancellation or policy change, reinstatement, rewrite, right, anything, so it will result in a new policy period basically. Okay, so the new submission will expire here with respect to the policy period. Okay.
Okay.
You got my point, right? Is there any doubt? Only when it comes to renewal, you have a different policy term. Here actually, policy term.
So like, what do we call it? Like the policy period or policy term? When if we have any cancellation or something in between?
It's a policy period basically. It's not a policy term. Policy term is nothing but it's effective from here and expiration date, right? Effective and expiration date. So initial one which you have created, that remains same policy term, right? But meanwhile, if you have any changes to that particular policy, then a policy period will come into picture basically. Okay. Otherwise, your policy term and policy period will be same. So
Okay.
if you have, say for example, if you have a cancellation here, right, and you are reinstating here itself, then how many policy periods we have here actually? We have three basically. One, new submission, second, cancellation, and the third one is reinstatement, right? So, but all the
Yes.
three will be within this policy term is what I meant. The expiration date of the
Okay.
policy remains same, right, in this scenario.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So that is the basics about policy. Yeah, I think this we have already discussed. Submission, what is a submission and all. They're just explaining it further, I believe. Yeah. Mm, you can just stop me if you are confused about anything here with this, because these transactions are also very important, basically. Okay. Policy term, yeah, cancellation rates, and all these things. I think I have covered. Mm, Yeah, this is what I mentioned. Rewrite creates a new policy from an existing policy. So it will copy all the data from your existing policy. And then if you want to change anything to that particular policy, you can change it using rewrite. Okay, that is the importance of having a rewrite. So, yeah. So midterm rewrites are there. So again, rewrites, right? You can have different rewrites as well. Okay. Okay. So rewrites, I think rewrite new account is there. So different terminologies for rewrites actually, right? And so rewrites policy to a new target account. So takes data from an existing policy and creates a new policy with a new policy number in a new account. So this is also possible. It need not be in the same account as well. So that is called rewrite new account basically. Okay. And rewrites only cancelled or expired policies to a new account. Policy terms can have a gap between them. I think these are all, I think we have covered, I believe. Mm, I think this is fine. So audits are also one separate part, in PolicyCenter actually. But I don't think you will be using this quite often. This is also one of the transactions basically. Okay, but we never call it in between these transactions, like, because this is the life cycle of a policy basically. But audit, even though it is kind of a transaction, but we never include this here actually in this life cycle. Okay, it's a separate part actually.
So the audit is done by the configuration developer.
It is actually, but what I meant is it is not. You cannot club audit here actually, because this can be, this can be correlated. Say, for example, submission can be correlated with all these transactions, right? Audit is actually separate one where you are going to generate the report of the premiums. That is mainly for auditing purpose. We will say, right? Say, for example, tax purpose or auditing purpose, we need it. It's not. Say, for example, if you have a policy, you might not be directly involved. That particular policy holder might not be directly involved in auditing actually. It might be insurer specific actually. That is what I meant. So for example, if I am having a policy, I am not directly involved in auditing actually. It not be the case actually. Okay. So what are all the policies and how many premiums the so and so insurer has provided? If you want to get a detail of all these things, you can get all these things with the reports basically, like the premium reports, final audit, all these things actually, estimates.
Okay.
So we have different. It's all insurance, terminologies basically. So yeah. So I'll just, so audits are line of business specific basically. Say for example, personal to line will be having a different kind of auditing strategy. It again depends, but we can configure this. Say for example, if you have a requirement specific to audits, but I think it will be very minimal. I believe auditing, I don't think you will come across quite often. But if you are if you are getting any requirements for auditing, definitely it will be LOB specific actually. And then a submission creates a policy with a premium based on estimated information. Say for example, this so the previous financial year, this is the premiums that are getting generated, and with the same data, next financial year, considering the inflation, what is the premium or what is the estimated premium? If you want to compare this actual premium with the estimated premium, it can generate the report based upon that, the deviation, right, from the actual to the estimated premiums. You can get the deviation with the help of this auditing basically. So that is where auditing comes into picture. Mainly this estimate versus actual, right? That is where you can find out the deviation for the auditing. Okay. So yeah, basically, yeah, policy transactions are represented in PolicyCenter by jobs. So I told you, right, this cancellation, new submission, all these transactions in PolicyCenter we term is as jobs basically. So you will be having an entity called job as well, where you have different subtypes for that particular job, like cancellation, submission, all these things are subtypes basically of that particular job. Okay, so I will come into what is subtype, what is supertype, all these things we'll discuss in detail, but just the beginning, right? I'm just explaining this in the fundamental ones actually. Okay. So essentially job and policy transactions are synonymous. That is true actually, because the transactions are in a way we are calling it as job in PolicyCenter. Okay. It's same only. So in the configuration part, wherever you find a transaction from, I mean, so for example, policy transaction is some nothing but it's a business analyst terminology. So business analyst, right? When we talk about these transactions, like new submission, I mean cancellations and all, so they call it as policy transaction. But as a developer, right, from a configuration point of view, when you search something in Studio, right, you will find job for all these transactions. Okay, that is what they meant. So jobs coordinate all of the work associated with creating and modifying a policy. Like wherever you have a change required for a policy, their job comes into picture, right? Say for example, policy change. I have explained earlier, right? You're going to change something with existing policy, so that again results in a new job, right? So yeah. So these are few of the things that are related to the job basically. Okay, job processes. You will find different gosu classes. I will explain what is a gosu class. So gosu class is nothing but we have different say for example, if you are considering Java, if you want to code something, some functionality you want to write it, right? We have something like gs file here, that is gosu file. Okay, where you can have your own code logics if you want to have some helper class or anything like that, right? So you will, so in case of job, we have different processes class, like renewal process.gs class. It again depends on your client's requirements, or it again depends on, because I can customize my own things, right? I can enhance something, I can extend some process, job process, and I can write on my own. But Guidewire out of the box, it provides all these processes, like policy change process, renewal process, all these things, where you have your own code logic. So once it triggers a new job, say for example you are going for a new policy change, it will go through all the process. Say for example, if it is a policy change process, right? So Guidewire out of the box, it will trigger this policy change process, and you might be having a function called start, right? Where once the user from UI initiate a policy change, this function in turn will be triggered. Right, maybe the button is having that function call for this policy change, and then that function will initiate its own code logic. It can initiate other functions. So that is how, so all these things comes under this job processes basically. Okay, so where it defines what are the things it needs to be done. Workflows are nothing but as I've explained earlier, that renewal workflow, for example, right? Though, so once you are into this thing, what is the direction of that particular job, right? Whether it has to be renewed, whether it has to be kept on hold, all these things are decided by these workflows. That code draft, I mean draft to code to bound to issue. So it's kind of a workflow, you can decide that way. Okay, so once the workflow executes successfully, only you can bound and issue a policy basically. Okay. Okay, wizards are nothing but we have different job wizards basically, like cancellation wizard, submission wizard. These things are PCF related basically, in UI related. Okay, so for each wizard you can define your own screens basically. Reinstate wizard might not be, it will be different from other wizards, because it doesn't need to have the detailed screen structure, right? Like if you have policy driver for a policy auto line, if you have a screen for policy driver, so when it comes to reinstatement, you need not see this policy driver screen there, right? Why we need to have a screen? Because you're not going to edit anything for a reinstatement. You're just going to pause and play it, right? So in that scenario, reinstatement wizard will define what are all the screens that are required for reinstating a policy basically. So that is where wizard comes into picture. Okay, it's a collection basically of screens, or like the direction from one screen to another screen, how it has to go. So these kind of things are decided by these wizards. Okay, so the jobs are various jobs are having its own wizards basically. Okay, and based on which transaction you are in, that particular wizard will be in use, will be in effect, and in UI you will be finding those screens. Okay, and again, right, we have product model. Product model is nothing but, where it's the backbone basically, where you have configured your coverages, exclusions, conditions, question sets, even the product, right? The product, initially you will be defining your product in product model. Then you have a policy line. Then the policy line is stacked to some coverages, and it in turn will be having its own, coverage terms, like, when in layman's perspective, say for example, you have some limits and deductibles, right? For a coverage basically, right? So these limits and deductibles are cover terms actually for a coverage. Okay, so that is how. So the product model again is dependent, or the job is again dependent on the product model basically. Like, the so and so coverage. Okay, and the availability of that particular coverage shouldn't be there for renewal. Okay, so then you can define the availability of that particular coverage, restricting only to other transactions. You can do that actually. Okay, and such kind of things are there. Okay, I mean, once we are into this product model in detail, I think you will be able to understand it. This is just the beginning, right? So again, the rules, right? Rules are also dependent on this jobs, like policy change. You can trigger an underwriting rule with respect to policy change alone, or we can exclude this underwriting rule with the same logic. We can exclude it for renewal. So for example, if you're trying to quote a renewal, even though the condition satisfies um, for new submission, and it is meant to trigger an underwriting rule for a new submission when quoting, while renewal we can exclude that particular underwriting rule from being triggered. So that is what it is, also again transaction dependent or job dependent basically. Okay, and then external systems call, right? It again, from which transaction the so and so external systems has to be triggered. So again, it is having a relation with the job. So this is what, I mean, job is all about actually. Okay, so till now, you have any questions?
So
Claudia?
what is the batch process?
No, that is again integration basically. Okay, batch process comes in integration part. That is not the configuration part. We have a separate session for that as well. Okay,
Okay,
so
okay.
batch process again comes with this external systems, I believe. Batch process, messaging queues, REST APIs, all those things. Okay,
So
so
it's
that,
not similar to job process.
no, 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 that is different. Batch process is entirely different actually. It is, we are scheduling something, or so that it will run in batches, and at that time it will trigger, and it will maybe, say for example, you want to schedule some batches of, to do some cleanup work, right? Say for example, if the load is very minimal, if no one is using the system, we need to run so and so batch at midnight. You can schedule a batch at that time, and so that batch will run, and it will do some logic so that it will clean up all the pending queues or something. So we can manually, modify something. We can manually have some code logic. We have plugins for that. So we'll come to that actually. Okay, batch process is a different one, but don't confuse yourself with job process. It's a different thing. Okay.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Okay, so this is something like, initiating jobs. Like, jobs can be started in three ways, right? So these, from the actions, you can change, cancel, or renew a policy basically, right? That is one thing. The second one is by external systems through APIs. From through APIs also you can trigger. Say for example, you need to create 100 policies. Okay, from UI it is very hard for you, right, to create 100 policies. You just think about it. Each policy creation itself will take around 5 to 6 minutes minimal, right? So 100 policies, if you want to, say for example, from testers point of view, if you want to create 100 policies, they cannot test it, because they will have to check the edge case scenarios, happy path scenarios, everything, right? It has to be detailed testing. We might have configured something, and we might have tested our own functionality, but it shouldn't break anything, right? So testers has to ensure that else is getting broken, right? From that perspective, if you want 100 policies, right, then definitely this is not a practical scenario, right? You cannot, it is not feasible basically, right? From UI, just go with actions and thing. So at that, I mean, in that perspective, this external systems through APIs, right, this will come into picture, where you can create from running the postman, or the REST APIs basically. You can define this collections. You have API collections for that. You can define it over there. we will be having JSON collections for that. You just run it, it will create 100 policies, maybe in 10 to 15 seconds. Okay, so that is important, and it will give you the policy numbers as well, where you can go and search it. Okay, so that is how we can integrate it with the external systems through APIs as well. This is possible, and this is through PolicyCenter batch process how we can create a job actually. Okay, how we can create a new submission or a new policy change. So in the job process, I mean in the batch process, as I mentioned earlier, you can have a code logic for that actually. So create a job batch process, and once you have a code logic to create a new submission, right, just run that batch, it will create a new submission, or it will create a policy change. Say, for example, you are providing a policy number and new submission details to that particular batch, and if you want to create a policy change, you can just initiate the policy change, right? Because you already know how this policy change is getting initiated in the backend. You have a policy change process GS file where you have a start, right? So just call that function, right? You just call that function directly in the batch, so that once you run the batch process, it will automatically trigger a policy change for that particular policy. So these are the three ways where we can initiate a job process. Okay. I think yeah, these are all. I think this is all just a history, right? As I've mentioned earlier. So if you want, I mean, say for example, you create a policy, you're going for a policy change here. So what all changes you're going to do for that particular policy, that will be reflected in the history. So in the later point of view, right? Say for example, Karan has created one policy in 2020. Now it is 2027, right? So the renewal, policy change, cancellation, it might have gone through various sequence of policy transactions and renewals, right? So all these things are noted because these are all revision basically. Okay, so policy period itself is updated. I will just explain all these things in later point of time, but just understand that we have a history for this policy. So once you select that history, you will get to know what are all the changes that has happened to this policy over the course of time. Okay, so whether this coverage is added or removed, when it has been added, when it has been removed, when a policy is renewed, rates and therefore premiums may change. So these things, right, you can get it from the history basically. Policy might have been cancelled. Okay, so that is all about history basically. And yeah, I mean, policy period, as I've told you earlier, right, it's just one version of that particular policy. So if, say for example, one policy, you have a new submission, you don't have any change to that particular submission, that whole submission, right, that will come under one policy period if you don't have any change. So that particular whole policy term is one policy period. We can say one policy period, right? So that is what they have mentioned here actually. So three versions we have it over here because they are going for a policy change. So that is the reason you are having three policy periods actually, but we have only one policy term, right? But if you're going for another renewal, right, it is a separate policy term actually. Okay, so in the new submission you have two policy changes. So in turn it is going to be what? It is going to be three versions, one new submission, and you have this one, two policy changes. So in turn you have three policy periods and one policy term, three versions, right? But if you're going for a renewal and if you don't have any change, right, the renewal itself will be having one policy term, and that renewal is itself is have one policy period actually. You got my point, right? So this is one policy term, and the renewal itself is going to be one policy period since it doesn't have any other change. So these, I think this is one of the prime questions, I believe, when you attend ACE exams, right? Or I think these kind of logics are there. So it's better you just have a thorough understanding, like how many versions, how many policy periods, policy terms. When you go for a renewal, how many policy terms you have. So these understanding is very important, I believe. Okay. Till now, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Okay. So the other one is like the policy transaction dates, right? Like on what date you're going to change. So that again depends on the, on that particular, say for example, for 2018, they have created a new submission. When they are going for a policy change, 7/20/18, they're going for a policy change. And 10/20 again, they're going for a policy change. Then this is the expiration date, right, for 2019. So this, I think we have already discussed, I believe. So 4/20 to 18 to 4/20 to 19 is your policy term here. And policy term for the renewal, nothing but from here, from this date, 4/2019 to 4/2020, right? So this is your policy term for the renewal. This is the policy term for your new submission, where you have two other policy changes as well. Okay, so when job becomes effective, it changes nature of policy. Say, for example, if it's what I meant is, if it's a policy change, right? So it's a different policy period. It's a policy change period, right? So that is what that policy's nature itself will get changed actually when that particular job is in effect. So each job has a transaction effective date. That is true because, say for example, if you're considering the first policy change, its effective date is not 4/2018, but it is effective on this date, that policy change, 7/2018. And the second policy change is effective from 10/2018. So the span of that particular policy period, right, is 10/2018 to 4/2019. Also, I think the premium also will differ accordingly as per the dates. Okay, so and the additions which you have added to that. So the transaction generally applies until end of the policy term. That is what, right? This is the end of the policy term, basically. Okay. So where you can view all your policy transactions, right? You have a policy file for that. So once you have coded and issued that particular policy, you will be getting a policy file page. Once you click that particular policy, you will be having a link for that with that policy number and in the account levels, right? So once you've issued and quoted, I mean, issued and bounded a policy, bounded and issued and policy, sorry. So once you have bounded and issued a policy and you have generated all the forms, documents, and everything, right? Then if you land to the account screen, in the account screen summary section, you will be finding this policy transaction or that particular policy, and you will be finding a link with the policy number actually. So once you click that policy number, you will find that particular policy in like policy file, because now it is filed. You can consider that way, right? That particular policy has been filed, right? So that is coming in the policy file now actually, where you cannot change anything to that particular policy. Okay, so summary page has two sections: pending and completed policy transactions. Policy transactions page lists all the transactions of the policy, just like policy change, all these things you can see in the policy transactions page. Okay. Okay, and yeah, I think this is pretty much. I think we are almost good with the timings. Do you have any questions till now, or we can wind? Sure, sure. Until now, I mean, did you get a basic thing about this Guidewire Policy Center? Because I
Yes,
mean,
yes,
too many
yes.
things also can confuse you. That is the reason. So we'll stop till here for the day, and we'll
Sure.
start tomorrow. Okay.
Okay. See you tomorrow,
Uh,
sir. Thank you.
sure. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Tim.